Good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm speaking with a dear friend of mine, Ruth Owen, media consultant and singer-songwriter. She has been in 11 bands.
Yeah, throughout my life, yeah.
11 bands throughout her life, and she has traveled the world immensely and done lots of work with NGOs and NATO, and she's quite the professional business lady and a good friend of mine. So I think one of the things that we're going to drive tonight with the questioning in terms of writing and creativity and kind of community is talking about your music and kind of like how long you've been doing that and where you kind of like what drove you and kind of how you are and how you got there today. So how did you start with writing music and getting into bands?
Well, I grew up in a very musical household. Neither of my parents are musicians, but they worked with music. My dad was a tour manager for Roxy Music and Genesis, Pink Floyd at a point, and they always had music in the house. So I grew up surrounded by a lot of music, specifically rock music. I got Sgt. Pepper for my 3rd birthday on a cassette tape that I put in my Fisher-Price cassette player. And Abbey Road for my 4th birthday. And those are quite complex albums. And I remember walking to nursery with my dad and asking him about the lyrics. It was the lyrics I was interested in. You know, lend me your ears and I'll lend you a hand. What does that mean, Dad? Does he actually want my ears off my head? And getting into that. And so music was always a very big part of my life. I played the piano from the age of 5. And then when I got to about 10 or 11, like a lot of kids do, I think I seriously got into the Beatles, David
A
Bowie.
lot of kids do. I mean,
you know,
yeah.
they play. It's very accessible music.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then of course Britpop was huge. I grew up in the UK, and there were bands like Blur, Oasis, and Pulp that were coming out, who played guitars.
Yeah.
It wasn't your techno music or your pop music. It was these really cool guys playing guitars. And then one of the things about the 90s is that people printed their lyrics on their sheet music.
I remember, like you
on the
use
inside
CDs.
of covers. Right?
Yeah. You read the music, you get into the lyrics and into the memory.
So I would sit down, and I remember Pulp released this album, His and Hers, and they said in the inside, please sit down, put this album on, read the lyrics while you're listening to the music.
That's interesting. I didn't have Pulp in the States. But the garage band kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I suddenly started thinking, there is poetry in the lyrics. I mean, I'd read poetry at school and I'd written poetry, but the idea of kind of combining the essence of what poetry is, which, breathing life into words, expressing a thought in a way that is almost tangible, that is paints a picture in someone's mind, and then combining that with music was incredibly exciting to me. And in fact, whenever I wrote poetry in my teenage years, and of course everybody wrote poetry, especially it was the era of grunge where we were all incredibly deep, so we're all writing poetry, there was always music when I wrote it in the back of my head.
Right.
Then when I was about 12, 13, I started playing guitar, started playing bass, and by 15 I was in my first band, very, very much influenced by grunge, by Hole, Courtney Love, and by the Riot Girl movement. So Bikini Kill, Sleater Kinney as well. Those were the cool bands for me. So I would just write lyrics all the time. And then by the time I was 19, I was lucky enough to do it professionally.
That's cool.
I met up with a Britpop band called Echo Belly, who were big in the UK when I was like 13, but they had subsequently broken up and then come back, and they wanted someone for their comeback tour. And so I started touring. And I started writing the music, but not really writing lyrics, but it was always in the back of my head.
Right.
But once I joined my first band, and I found out it was amazing and wonderful and being like in a gang, and also plus...
Did you have scooters or anything like that?
It would have been like that, like quadrophenia or something. But then also, boys were interested in me for the first time in my life. I was like, this is awesome. So I started writing a lot, and then I started writing my own music and my own lyrics, and then it's just something I've always done. And it's something, when I think of creativity, it's the first thing that comes to me is songwriting.
That's cool. So do you pull off of your lyrics for your songs, like when you're writing, what is the kind of element that you're in when you start thinking of song lyrics, and what kind of gets you in that mood to write in that respect?
It's interesting, and I'd never really thought about it until you asked me.
Okay,
You know?
yeah.
But how do I write song lyrics? What happens? It's different every way, and I know that a lot of people come to the writing process from a different direction. Mostly with me, I want to write about a certain thing, a feeling, an experience I've had, and a person, and then usually I will come up with a cool phrase. Like the title of the song, or a nice rhyming couplet, or some kind of nice combination of words that I start building around.
Like a driver, like something that just like...
Exactly. Remember, one of the first songs I ever wrote was called Hair of the Dog. I just learnt that expression, and I wanted to write about this couple I knew who loved to drink all the time. And I had this couplet in my mind for a long time, which was like, we're hairs of the dog and we're falling in love. This kind of half rhyme thing. Yeah. And then I just built it around there. And I that happens with a lot of my songs. It's usually that I have the lyrics in some form or another, and then I get to the music.
Right.
Not always, in fact. One time I was in Sri Lanka, and in Sri Lanka they have this street dish called kotoroti. And how they make it is they chop up all these leftovers on this hot plate, and they do it to a rhythm. And every single cafe has their own rhythm.
Oh, nice.
And it's all different. And one time I was just walking around and I sampled this rhythm, and then it was the rhythm that then inspired the lyrics. But usually, it's a phrase. I worked in Afghanistan for some time, for 5 years. I was in a band there where I was writing all the songs.
Right.
And I was singing as well. And I remember sitting around, and I think a lot of people will be familiar with the phrase "war is boring." It is boring.
It's boring.
There's a lot of sitting around.
There's a lot of sitting around.
And I remember one day I was sitting around
Hurry up and wait, is it?
Yeah, hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
I was sitting around going, this isn't a war zone, this is a bored zone.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a song called Bored Zone, and it just, that little German of an idea then unfurls into lyrics, essentially.
Yeah. So going into when you were in the war zone, when you were in Afghanistan, what was the band was called White City?
That's right, yeah.
And so you started off writing music first, or did you run into other people? And I feel like I get this feeling that you're constantly in the search for putting a band together.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like any kind of like place that you go to. I feel like you have this itch that you need to scratch. That you're like, I kind of need a new band, or like
it's true.
I need to be in that. So how did White City get started, and how did White City get started? What did that do for you?
Oh, people always ask me, why don't you just do music by yourself? I mean, you describe me as a singer-songwriter, which is very complimentary, but that would suggest I do a lot of music by myself, and I actually rarely write songs by myself. I love jamming with other people. I love coming up with musical ideas with people. Like I said before, I want to be in a gang.
Yeah.
And there is nothing like being on stage with a bunch of people and making this music together, making something together and collaborating. So with White City, I'd heard there was a band in town. I was living in Kabul. I heard there was this band and that they'd just lost their lead singer. And they were actually a covers band, but I'm like, do you know what? I need to make music. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So I turn up in this nondescript Afghan house in the middle of nowhere. I remember I was with my boyfriend at the time, and he really didn't want to drop me there because it was like a dodgy neighborhood. And I knock on the door, and this like drunken Australian tramp answers it. Travis, who's the guitarist, and he's like, "Where have you been hiding? I don't believe it. A girl who plays bass." I don't know if this is the right guy. So I go in and we start jamming, and we jam a few cover songs, and it's fun. And then he just goes, "Oh, and there's this riff I've been working on." He starts playing this kind of Led Zeppelin kind of riff. I'm like, this is amazing. And I just start riffing lyrics over the microphone. I put a bass line to it. And at the end, I turn to him and the drummer. It's just me, him, the drummer, 3-piece.
Yeah.
And I go, "Have you guys got any more originals?" And they go, "No." I'm like, "Do you mind if I write some?" And that's how we became White City became the band. A covers band actually turned into an originals band.
Nice. So you ended up just writing songs and kind of becoming the songwriter in that respect.
Exactly. And I would write songs about everything, Afghan life, being in a conflict zone. I wrote a song about suicide bombers, but then I wrote a lot of fun songs about riding bikes in the desert, kind of thing that we would do. Or, funny things.
Time that, with that spare time that you have on your hands there, the kind of things that you get up to, yeah. So what kind of venues did you kind of get into in Kabul when you were there?
Well, as a civilian working in Kabul, you have much more freedom than the military.
Right.
I lived outside a base. I just lived like a normal person, in as far as you can be a normal person. But it was always difficult to get venues. There were some restaurants that catered to foreigners,
right,
that you could play in. There were embassies. Sometimes they would invite you, but generally there wasn't a lot. And also, a lot of these places wouldn't let Afghans in, and we were never comfortable about that.
Right,
because we don't want to be segregated, right?
No.
And we knew that there were some kids in town, we'd heard, who wanted to be in bands and wanted to be doing rock music, who were intrigued by rock music.
Right.
They hadn't had a lot of exposure to rock or metal. They'd had a lot of exposure to pop, rap, Bollywood music, but not rock and metal. So in the end, what we did was we worked together with Afghan musicians and we made our own venue. And we called it The Venue. I know, pretty cool, huh?
So that's like, kind of a line, but... so, I mean, that, in the way of, like, striking up communities, that's huge. That's huge. I think we were talking about it, and you said that you kind of did, in order to create the venue, you guys put tires in sandbags.
That was actually our rehearsal room, and that was in our house.
Oh, that was a rehearsal room.
That was a rehearsal room. So the venue was actually a venue,
okay.
And it was a bit off the street, so you couldn't really hear the music, and we could get away with having that as a music venue.
Right.
But we needed a rehearsal room. And we needed it to be soundproof because Afghanistan is still a conservative society, and there's a certain slice of that society that sees music as haram, as sinful.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, and also, as foreigners, we could kind of get away with it, but the Afghan musicians had it a lot harder. So we were like, right, we need a proper rehearsal room, and it needs to be soundproof. So we're going to make it ourselves. So we literally built this wooden room. Made it float on old car tires, and then insulated it with sandbags, and then built a room around it.
That's really clever, yeah.
And so it was always kind of springy. It was fun to rehearse in because it kind of bounced up and down.
It kind of makes it energetic, doesn't it? Yeah.
And then these Afghan kids would just traipse in and out of our house at all hours of the day, working and rehearsing.
Yeah.
And when they weren't rehearsing, they were hanging out in the front yard, and we were communicating, we were engaging, we were jamming. We were talking about the problems, that they faced, that we faced, or we were just having fun. And our house and also the venue became a safe place for Afghan kids to express themselves. And later it evolved for people to do art there. Graffiti became really big. And different forms of spoken word poetry, because Afghanistan has a very long traditional history of spoken word poetry. In the end, Travis put together a culture and music festival that ran yearly, but it all sprang up from just sitting around and doing music.
Yeah, doing the things that you guys enjoyed, yeah. So, creatively, how do you think that's kind of... Do you think it's made you grow creatively since then, or do you think that what has it changed in you in that regard?
I think it's absolutely changed me. The most obvious change at the beginning was the musical one, because we were doing straight rock, but these Afghan kids were bringing in all kinds of influences, traditional instruments, different rhythm patterns that we hadn't known before, and they were weaving it into their music. And when we just jammed, when we didn't really have a plan, we were just jamming music, they were bringing these patterns, and then that changed the way I was thinking about the tones I was using musically, but then lyrically as well. Of course, when you're in that kind of situation, you start writing about things that you haven't experienced before. You start trying to see you're trying to see a world from someone else's perspective. Right. And that was actually another writing trick I used to use. I'd go, okay, I'm not Ruth anymore. I am a kid who's grown up in a madrasa on the border. How would that feel? And I mean, I can never really understand that, right?
But trying to put yourself in somebody else's mind. Yeah.
Yes, trying to put myself in somebody else's mind, not to say that I know what their experience is. I can never share someone's experience like that, but at least trying to get out of my bubble, my Western white middle class bubble for a little bit.
Right.
That definitely changed the way I wrote.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of talk about the idea that the kind of Western echo chamber that we live in, and the way that we kind of don't hear the outside world,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like so much happening in the way of like world and cultures, and we're kind of drowning that out in a lot of ways, and not being open to the idea of like different cultures. But I mean, it's not true. It's it's just a matter of like perception. So, but so now you're still doing writing, but you're still doing music writing, but you were in a band last time when you were here in Brussels.
Yeah, that's right.
And have you been continuing on with music, or have you continue on with writing, or how has that worked out since your latest move?
So I was in a band in Brussels for a while,
right?
But I wasn't the writer. White City was a very full-on experience. We ended up doing lots of tours, and doing the writing. It takes it out of you after a while. And being the front person.
You did lots of videos as well.
I did a lot of videos. Yeah.
What was that like?
They were really fun.
Was that the first time that you had done the videos, like in that kind of? Oh no, you did professional music for.
I did professional music videos, and we did do a couple of professional music videos filmed in Afghanistan. But we also did tour diaries and things like that. And it's fascinating. And I'm looking back at them now and being really fascinated. Then when I came to Belgium, I wanted to take a back seat for a while. So I let someone else in the band do the writing. That was fun. And now I still write songs less. I forced myself to write one.
Children's songs. I mean, you write my children's songs.
Yeah. So I wrote a song for the birth of your youngest son. Which was so much fun.
It was really fun. It
was
really
good fun.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm concentrating on prose.
Okay, nice.
And I'm writing a lot of prose, inspired though by my times in White City.
Awesome. So it's like touching back on like a memoir almost. Like.
Yeah, sort of half memoir, half novel.
Okay, nice.
At the moment, yeah.
Seems
it's good fun. And those experiences are incredibly important to me. There was one band in particular, Afghan band, called District Unknown, who was the first and, as far as I know, the only metal band in Afghanistan. A documentary's just been released about them called Rockable.
Right.
And they used to hang around our house all the time. And it was just talking to these guys that made me realise how important music was for them. I remember one of the guys going, it's heavy metal. Literally, we live and there's metal and it's heavy and it's coming from the skies. And it is heavy metal. And they got death threats. And for a while they didn't play. And for a while they played in masks. And then one day they decided to take the masks off. And I said, why, guys? I understand if you never want to play again. And they said, if we don't play, we might as well be dead.
That's fair, yeah.
Because we need to express ourselves. And it made me realize what a privilege it was. When I was a teenager, music was everything to me. And if I couldn't go to those gigs and mosh and be aggressive and violent in a safe, controlled situation and channel my energy through either my lyrics or the lyrics of people I was listening to, the Henry Rollins and all of the hardcore music I was into, something might have happened to me. I might have gone down a wrong path.
Having that outlet is amazing. Yeah.
And these kids in Afghanistan, they never get to be kids. They never get to be stupid in a safe place or express their emotions.
Through those kind of creative
it's so
outlets
constricted.
as well. Yeah.
And anything that I could do to help to let them have that safe space was really important. But that just really got to me when they said, if we don't do this, we might as well be dead. We don't express ourselves, we might as well be dead.
That's really incredible, actually. Because I can't imagine, and I live that with you, because like I remember like going to punk shows and getting into the mosh pits and being like, this was a good place.
Yeah.
This is a good place because the music was good, the energy was good, the message was positive. It was there. It was getting everything out, and you had that channel of energy that you could just focus and release, and you felt good when you went home at the end of the night. And there was a lot of chaos on the ends of that, on the threads that but at the same time, it was almost balanced chaos. Like that kind of lifestyle, to have that outlet to get out what I needed to get out, um, was really important for me, and like it was important for you. And I think the same thing, about writing in that regard. Like I think that having those creative outlets and being able to work on your creativity, like whether it be writing, whether it be art, etc. The more that I saw myself perfecting what I did, or meant that I was more in tune with myself emotionally, and the stability and the tools that, like, I have friends that um, suffer from bipolar disorder, but they've built up tools to really work through a lot of the issues that they have. And so they feel, and they've talked with me about the fact that they feel that if they hadn't have done that, that there would be a lot different in terms of like what kind of position they'd be in. They'd probably be on more medication, or they wouldn't be able to be in tune with themselves in terms of their emotional connection to things that are going on. And it's difficult because that's, mental health issues are incredibly hard to deal with. But, having those kind of creative outlets gives a lot more to people in the way of tools and dealing with emotions and understanding their emotions, I think. And you were talking about, excuse me, you were talking about writing about White City in your prose that you're doing now. And I find that awesome, because it's just like, I remember like a lot of the stuff that I write about is drives into like past experiences that were really, positive for me in terms of like building my kind of creative inspiration and the way I go forward with like I am now. So where do you see yourself in like, I guess, where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? I mean, you've just started a media consultancy, and this is your business. This is the stuff that you get into and that you do and you enjoy, probably above all. And that music kind of now is, I mean, music's more along the lines of the thing that's Ruth outside of work. So what do you see with? Do you see yourself continuing to do music always for the rest of your life? Obviously.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that I have to do. It's an urge. My partner will tell you, if I haven't played the piano or the guitar for a week, I'm moody as hell. And he's like, "Why don't you go and play some music?"
This is why you got a ukulele.
Yeah, because it's portable and I can just take it anyway and just play it when I'm watching the TV or whatever. It's something that's so deeply ingrained in me. I need to do it, and I will always do it. After I finish the book, I would like to start on a solo album. I want to take off the safety blanket of a band, because I'm not in a position at the moment to have a band because of traveling with the business, and do a solo album just to see if I can do it. Just to engage that, because every time I do write a song, I think, why don't I do this more often? So that's something I want to do. And then with writing, again, I would like to take that step into maybe not drawing so much on my own personal experiences verbatim. I think everybody at heart draws onto personal experiences to an extent, but then actually take the full jump into fiction and do some writing in fiction. So those are my goals. I don't know how long they're going to take me, but that's what I'll do at the moment. And with the business is still very creative. I'm a media consultancy, and people come along with an idea and say, how can we put this into photo or video or tell a story or put together a multimedia print piece or something like that. So there is a creative outlet there. It's just because it's not to do with music, I tend to see it as work rather than a creative outlet.
Right. How do you turn that? Yeah, it's a creative outlet that just doesn't scratch that itch that you kind of want to get as well. So I mean, that's nice though that you're able to, as if you're, even though the position that you're in at the moment with your music, even though it feels like it's slowed down a little bit, you're still drawing on that aspect of your creativity to still inspire you to write and to take you back to music at some point. The way that you want to be doing music. And maybe you and I can collaborate and do like children's books or something. A child's like.
It's funny you should say that.
Should we do this?
It's funny you should say that. When I was 18, and I was leaving my secondary school, my high school, everybody wrote predictions for each other in the yearbook. And my prediction was from one of my oldest friends, who's still one of my friends, and she predicted that I would end up being an eco-warrior, living in a treehouse and writing children's books and drinking copious amounts of port.
Have you lived in a treehouse?
I've stayed in a treehouse, but writing children's books really appeals to me.
Yeah.
And I'm actually at the moment I'm reading a sequence of children's books called The Dark is Rising, which was written in the 1970s. It's for older children. It's sort of almost young adults.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that...
Is that the kind of genre that you would probably focus on?
Probably, yeah. I'm very much into magic realism and science fiction, and I think it's a very exciting time for young adult fiction. Just looking at what Philip Pullman did recently, that opens all of these questions and gets into quite deep philosophy and religious understanding, very ecumenical religious understanding.
Right.
Is something that I would be attracted to. But like you say, music will never go away. It will either be at the forefront or it will be in the background, but it will always be there. Right now, all my creative energy is going into the book.
Right.
And that's deliberate.
How far along do you feel like you are with the book? Like, that's interesting. Like, I've never actually contemplated writing a memoir, but I mean, do you find it? Is it more like a memoir, or is it?
It's more like a memoir, but I'm structuring it like a novel.
Okay, yeah.
I've got characters, and I'm very conscious of having they have threads all the way through, and they have peaks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like writing a memoir like a novel. It's not just a series of events.
Okay.
There are some things I've switched around a bit, and there are some things that I just don't go into detail with because I'm very conscious of telling a story. That's all I ever wanted to do, was be a storyteller.
I think you are. I think your music is from the bard standpoint. If you take it into fantasy, aspects, it's like, look at the bard. The bard is the person that tells the story and leads the idea through music, and kind of saunters around the story of the adventures with everybody else. So
I've always said at the zombie apocalypse, that's the role I'm going to play.
Yes. Can I?
I'll be the bard.
How do I join that? Like,
you have to have some skills, man. My skills is being the bard.
Yeah, I'm not the bard. I'll play the rogue. We'll be there.
But it's interesting to know that human beings have always needed that storyteller.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be connected with music. But the great thing about music is that you don't have to speak the same language to be a part of it. In fact, you don't have to even play an instrument. All you need to do is clap your hands together and you're already part of something.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes music so special to me, and such an open and fluid creative medium.
Yeah, it makes writing much more accessible as well. It makes people more tuned into what's happening. And we can even go back to the beginning of this interview when we're talking about how you're opening up a CD from Pulp, and it's like you're encouraged to read the lyrics and put that to the music. And even if we were talking about White City, and you're engaging with other cultures, and some people might not even speak English, but being introduced to music in that fashion and being able to see the intensity and the passion that comes out of what you're singing, even if they don't understand it, can be a moving experience, and jettison you into that kind of, that world and that kind of outlet in terms of creativity and the community. I mean,
right. I mean, music touches the parts that other media don't touch because it bypasses the thinking brain. That there's a reason that totalitarian dictatorships or repressive regimes try at the first instance try and control or repress or even ban, in the cases of some regimes, music, because it just bypasses the brain, goes straight to the heart, goes straight to the emotion, and that is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. I mean, and what I think about music, and it's interesting. It's a harmonious aspect about anytime music comes into my presence. It hits my body. And if you want to talk about starting a movement, like, music will start a movement. Like, the idea that, like, intrinsically the vibration, like, mirrors up with something that's happening in your own vibration of your own body and your own being, that says a lot. That moves you. That kind of, like, it hits your heartstrings.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. Like, to be able to think that having that much connection, that much power to move people, and through that kind of that medium. Yeah, that's
But
really awesome.
combine it with words, and then you have something really powerful.
Yeah.
There's a reason that people on their yearbooks or on their stickers or on their gravestones so often have the lyric to a song, and that there's a power in people in football stadiums or whatever all singing together, or in churches or whatever. There's a power of bringing words and music together that is unmatched, I think, in any other kind of outlet.
Yeah. I guess what can we what do you think about the kind of communities that you want to create for creativity right now? I mean, I don't think I want to go too much into like what you do in terms of work, because I think that's a different kind of arrangement. But in terms of your creative outlet, like what do you look to do in terms of building communities here on out? Do you have kind of any concepts in mind, or do you keep continuing to think that you're going to go along the same kind of pattern that you have been, which is to, well, you did say you want to go solo for a little bit.
Yeah.
But
that's more of a personal challenge, just to see if I can do it.
Right.
But really, if I'm true with myself, what I miss is collaboration.
Yeah.
And that could be just joining a local jam session. And just playing music just for the sake of it, or not. Or it could be sitting down and writing with people. In the past, I've done background music while people have done poetry over the top. You know, that kind of Patti Smith style. So I would definitely love to do more of that. And I mean, music is a universal language. I'm currently learning German, and I'm in a class in Germany that is 3/4 refugees. And it's hilarious. You know, the Turk and the Kurd sit next to each other, and the Iraqi and the Iranian and the Syrian, and there's these two Afghans and you know, a Ukrainian girl, and then me, and we're all trying to conquer this dastardly language, this really difficult language together. So there's a camaraderie. You know, sometimes I wonder, you know, what would happen if we did something creative together.
Okay, yeah.
And I know one of them runs projects for women. What if you know, we tried to do something where some of them wrote words or poetry? Doesn't have to be in German, can be in whatever language they want.
Right.
And maybe I could do music in the background for that.
And somebody could put the kind of visual aspect to it.
Because it's different. I think it frees people a lot when they have a background, when they have like music in the background or something that they can read over. It frees them somehow to be more open than to just be standing with a mic and silence and an audience and reading something that they've written.
Right. There's a lot more to it with a game.
Yeah, exactly. and that multimedia element as well, you know, having a light show or having images on the background. I really like what we were doing in Afghanistan with these festivals, which was bringing together different media. You know, we'd have someone live painting and someone reading poetry and someone doing music, and all brought together in different ways. I think it's interesting. It doesn't always work, of course not.
Yeah, but...
but it's fun.
Right. It is nice to be able to see that kind of that inspiration come together and see everybody pulling their art together too for one purpose as well. Yeah. I wonder. I feel like that the stuff that I'm going to be working on is probably going to have to do with children, and I like the idea that we were going to the perspective of working on children's work. Like, do you think collaborating with do you think you will collaborate with artists in like outside of music to try and put together what you're doing for your own music, or do you think that will keep you in the loop with what you want to do in terms of like staying in the gang, or do you just really want to do it solo, all the way solo?
I don't know. I mean, if I did a solo album and I had to release it, in the past I've done the artwork myself.
Right.
A lot of collage. I did illustration at school, but I would like to get someone else's perspective on that and see what they did. One of the interesting things we did with White City when we released our first album is we got a what's called a comic journalist, a guy from the Netherlands who is a journalist, but when he reports on a story, he reports it through comic book form.
Oh, nice.
And it's incredibly powerful.
Right.
So we started working with him. He did the artwork, and he also produced an animation that was inspired by the story of the album. I mean, the album wasn't quite a concept album, but it did have a thread all the way through it. And we just let him run riot with that and go. And he came up with this idea of the White City being this kind of fortress that the band were trying to escape from. And it's not what I had meant in the album, but it was fascinating. It was really interesting to see how my art had inspired somebody else's art.
Yeah.
And that's something that I would definitely be interested in collaborating on in the future.
When you see that, like, I was just going back to White City though.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the name for White City come from? Now, because now that you've got me like interested in the fact that we were talking about the artists collaborating, like
yeah.
But where did that come from?
We got asked like that all the time. In fact, when we were touring around the former Soviet Union countries, all the countries that end in stan, basically Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and all of those countries, Uzbekistan, people would ask us that all the time. One person even asked us like, is it from a white nationalist background? What? No, no. It's actually named after a UN state of alert. So the UN has different levels of danger alert. There's like blue city, yellow city, red city. White city means imminent danger. Stay where you are. Don't move. And when the band were beginning, even before I even joined, and they were called something else, they would do these gigs, and the UN would call White City, and then everyone would be locked down and couldn't come to the gigs. In fact, only the hardcore would sneak out somehow. And so it became an almost a badge of honor. It's White City, but we're still going out.
Nice, taboo. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like taboo, but kind of illegal. But.
Yeah.
So we've talked about your writing process, and we've talked about some of the stuff that you want to do with community and some of the stuff that you want to do with creativity. Is there anything that you want to speak about in terms of, I guess, anything that you do in terms of, I don't know, how do you, is there anything you want to speak on in terms of any of that kind of strikes you as interesting and will engage? I really don't know how to post that. I guess I think you're going to always kind of be creative. That's kind of who you are, and like you're going to stick with music, and you're going to stick with writing. And and you've done all the bits. You've done music without writing, and you've done writing, and have you ever done writing with just writing lyrics but not playing music? Would that ever fit into you?
I mean, I have written lyrics. I used to, walk around with a notebook at school, just writing lyrics all the time. But they were always with music in the back of my head.
Okay, right.
And eventually, sometime I would sit down with these lyrics, pick up a guitar, and try and put them to the music. I know there are artists that work differently. We were talking about the Manic Street Preachers before we started rolling, and I know that they worked very much with poetry. You had Richie Manic and Nicky Wire. They would write poems, and they would only ever think of them as poems. And then the drummer and the guitarist would have the possibly unenviable job of then translating that and putting it into music like that.
Right.
But I've always thought in terms of music, and it's just the way my creativity goes. I did visual arts at school.
Right.
I was going to go to art school, and so I do visual arts. I have painted with acrylics. I did a lot of illustration work, as I mentioned, but it was never. It seemed to occupy a different part of my brain than music, which is strange because the visual art that I like the most is very much the abstract expressionists, the Kandinskys and the Mark Rothko, who were all incredibly influenced by music, who wanted to portray on canvas what they heard in jazz, for example, or some of the more eternal music of the 20th century.
Right.
So it's just strange. They're in different parts of my brain, but I don't think it's like that for anyone. And maybe if I explored those more, I would find a different vein of creativity. Yeah. I don't know.
So, I mean, you could even go as far as saying, like, venturing out and doing, like, spoken poetry and seeing, like, what kind of prospects you could get out of that. And what do you think? Could you see yourself doing spoken poetry? At
the moment, no. That seems really scary. I have a very good friend who's an amazing poet, and I've been to a lot of her recitals, and I've never been a big spoken poetry fan, I've not disliked it. It's just not been my thing. And I've gone along, and she's been amazing. She's absolutely blown me away. And then I mentioned Patti Smith. You know, there are artists who are essentially poets, but with music,
Right.
that I enjoy very, very much. But my brain's not geared. But maybe it would be a good exercise. They say that it's a good exercise to do something you're not comfortable with.
Right. Just move into a different creative form and
Yeah.
start playing around with that and seeing if that's going to help heighten what you like to do the most with your creativity.
Or even theatre. You know, I go to a lot of theatre.
Yeah.
I love reading plays.
Yeah.
I actually like getting the books and reading the play and listening to them.
Same.
So that would be interesting to write something in play form. You know, think about dialogue. Think about staging.
Would you do that with the troupe you're at with the German class right now?
Theatre is a very, very, very powerful medium. Again, that might be a good thing.
It's fun. Everybody. I mean, every time I've been grouped up to get on stage and do some acting, it's been completely like nerve-wracking, but at the same time, once it happens, it's just like incredibly fun, and it's just been one of those times in my life where it's just I would do it again, without a hesitation if somebody asked me to. So.
And the other thing I would like to do is comedy, not stand-up comedy. I would like to write
like sitcom kind of.
Yeah, like sitcom, or just write something funny. I've spent so much of my life trying to be super serious, you know, write super serious, meaningful stuff. And actually, when I'm writing this memoir, a lot of it is hilariously funny.
Cool.
And there's so much great comedy out there, especially in the UK at the moment. There's an incredible comedy series running out that manage to be funny and profound at the same time. And in fact, look at the States right now. Some of the most profound political commentary is happening in the comedy world.
Yeah.
You know, with things like the Today Show and things like that. And I also think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that this is meant to be fun.
Yeah, live.
You know, so why not just have fun and do something funny?
Yeah.
I was thinking the other day, I was thinking of ideas to write for children's books. And my dad passed away almost a decade ago, and he was a grumpy old soul. He was a Scotsman. And I was just thinking, what if he came back to haunt the house? What if he came back, you know, and his ghost, you know, started complaining about how high the heating was up or something like that. So I would love to write something funny.
Like Grandpa in the house.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That would be fun. It's nice, and it's really, like, even sitting down with you and talking about stuff like that kind of makes me think outside the bounds of, like, because I've not written any children's books, but I've thought about it for a long time. Because I'd love to write some for my boys.
Yeah.
But I've been focused on doing a lot more poetry, and so when I do write and I think about ideas for doing stuff for children's books, it gets written down, but it gets kind of sidelined.
Yeah.
It's like something, and that's the one thing about writing all the time that I love. It's like sometimes it's just that stuff is just, while it's not useful to the poetry that I'm writing immediately, it's just pushing that off to the side for a minute and then coming back to it, like, you know, I breathe, like 6 months later or something, like I'll stumble upon it and I'll be like, oh yeah, it's awesome. And then it could be that kind of driving momentum to push me into something else. And but yeah, like so I guess we have probably about 10 minutes left. And we can talk about what you, I guess how I want to close this. Like, I don't think we're going to close this. I think we're going to continue talking.
We're definitely
We're probably
going to continue talking.
What kind of comments or what kind of things do you have to tell for people who are young or trying to get into their arts and their creativity and their writing or their, you know, poetry or whatever they're doing in that regard? What kind of words of inspiration do you have? Because I have to say, you inspire me because you're incredibly driven. You're an incredibly professional, intelligent woman. I mean, I constantly inspired by you. So it's always fun to collaborate and throw ideas back and forth between you and me. So for myself, I don't know what I'm going to get. But like, what would you be able to tell everybody else?
there's so much pressure to be perfect these days. I think that the most important thing is just to get out, to do something, to write something, create something. Do not be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
The fear of failure is what stops me starting. And I've written some terrible stuff, you know, but I just get out there and I write it. And the second thing is make sure you're having fun. Don't always try and make something that's perfect or that you put your heart and soul into. One of the best experiences I had as a teenager and in my early 20s was I would hang out with friends. We would go around to one of their flat who had very rudimentary recording setup, and we would just have fun. You know, we might get a cheap bottle of wine or whatever we could afford, or some cheap snacks,
Right.
and we would record all day. And sometimes we would record full body pop songs, really thought through. And sometimes we record comedy songs. We would record songs about we would get the newspaper one day, I remember, and the headline was Mongolian deathworm. So we did like a pretend news report that then turned into a song about a Mongolian deathworm and then ended in like death metal. And it was just funny,
But
you know?
yeah.
And we would just mess around. But the important thing was that we were creating.
Right.
We weren't trying to make this perfect piece of art. We were just getting out there and doing it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is collaborate with people. It's so much more fun. Be in a gang.
Yeah, gangs.
Yeah.
Like good gangs, like
yeah, good
positive,
gangs, not like
like
maybe gang is the wrong word.
Yeah, constructive gangs. We mean gangs in a very positive kind of creativity building way, not
not bad gangs, but collaborating with people is fun, and don't always set yourself such high standards.
Yeah. Go shoot low, and then hope that you get there eventually. Little goals, like little goals.
When you least expect it, you'll make something that's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, Ruth. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
Sitting down with me and talking about your music and your creativity and your want to share that with communities. So, and hopefully we get to do this again soon.
Hope so.
Okay, everybody. I'll be coming back Monday nights, 8:30, same time. I'll be interviewing two ladies that work together over in Brussels to put together the spoken poetry nights, and I hope to see you guys out there then. If you like what you saw today and you enjoyed the interview, go ahead and follow and see down below any of the websites and the links that I have to my Twitter feed and Facebook, and jump on there and see what's going on too. And it was nice having you guys out this evening, so thank you.